to take a few things offline. Oh, Elizabeth's here. That's wonderful. Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry I'm late. It's been days of back-to-back meetings.
Oof, I understand. Thank you so much for being here. We're actually just getting started because Sean is also running late, but we're going to go ahead because we have a lot to get through and start without him. I think that we're probably good in this small group without introductions. We've done lots of those through these working groups. And I think we're going to move from on our agenda, we will move Appendix G to the end because I think we need Sean more for that proposal. So here's the agenda that we had sent out to you all. And so I will move these 15 minutes after the PEUI proposal. So with, unless someone disagrees with that, I think we were going to start there because it was the subject of our last meeting, but we'll move it to the end. We'll start by looking at the Denver modeling protocols and getting input on those, and to finalize the PEUI proposal. And then we'll try to slot the Appendix G in after that. You can see we don't have very long because this is hopefully wrap up. We've been through all of this quite a few times before to finish these up. And Courtney, or in the group, I might actually ask, should we finalize the PEUI proposal before we get to the protocols that are all the detail for that proposal?
Yeah, that
probably 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. Okay. Let's do that. Courtney, since Sean isn't here, do you want to go ahead and share that PEUI proposal? I don't know that we need to do a full walkthrough. I think this group has read it, but we can at least pull it up on the screen. I think that you have all seen this and know where each of the numbers came from for just these 5 property types that could take this path as an option. Did you all have anything, Elizabeth or Taylor or Antonio, that you want to talk about within this proposal, or is this one looking pretty good? I don't think it's changed at all, Courtney, since we saw it on two meetings ago, right?
Right. I think Sean added
right.
Energized Denver language, but just recognizing that it exists.
Yep.
I actually haven't looked at this yet.
Great. Would it be helpful?
I'm just catching up.
Did a bit more of a walkthrough for you then as you read, or do you want us just to stop so you can read for a couple minutes? Do you have a preferred format, Elizabeth? I know you haven't been in all of these.
No, I don't want to slow everybody down if you've if you've already gone through this several times, and I can just kind of catch up on my own time if there's another agenda. But also I wanted to just set expectations about where I was at mentally.
Yeah, but this is also a small group, so I want to make sure we're meeting your needs. You're a key committee member, and Taylor's been really involved in the drafting, and he and Mohit helped us set all of these EUIs. So I actually wonder if Taylor, you might want to, because we don't have Sean, would you want to just do a 2-minute summary for Elizabeth of how we got to this proposal so that she has that context for today? Doesn't have to rethink all the stuff that you and Mohit helped us think through. Does that sound useful, Elizabeth?
Yeah, sure. Courtney, could you zoom in just a hair? I'm old and I can't read small. Thanks. No, that's great.
So, Elizabeth, I think in general, right, this is similar to the site energy where it creates an appendix. So it's all in an appendix, and then C407 would reference the appendix to be able to comply. This is honestly pretty light, and then that next document has way more information. But essentially, I think we went over all these, but these EUIs are derived from either from a mix of Energized Denver and then the prototype buildings, and then 10% better than Energized Denver or prototype building, whichever was more stringent. And then, so I think some of the items we talked about, right, you can do weighted average. So if you have a mixed use, you can use that restaurant bar. So Sean added that in, which is good. References the modeling rules and procedures, which used that Boulder document, which we can go over, and I have a few items on that. But I think, it's pretty basic.
Quick question on this. So if if we have a project with a parking garage, say, would that still get lumped into office or hotel? It's not or is it, would you also have a separate parking garage allowance? I know it gets weird because we're talking about conditioned square footage. And maybe we haven't gotten that far yet.
Well, no, it's a good question. I don't know if we directly address it. Like, I know Boulder's direction has always been you just have to add the energy use of the parking garage, but you don't get anything for that. I don't know if we directly call that out in here, so that could be a note to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could just be a question only because like Denver projects, we're going to have a lot more variability. You know, we'll have R2 that has garages and R2 that doesn't have garages. And Boulder, there's not a huge, there's just not huge parking garages in Boulder, right? So we don't have quite that same. And I don't know how that applies to Energized Denver either.
So for Energized Denver, parking, as long as it's sub-metered, can always be subtracted. If it's not sub-metered, then you can enter the square footage of parking, and there's assumptions on if it's covered or uncovered that portfolio manager, like for a score, adjusts for you. But mostly for hitting Energized Denver targets, I would encouraging everyone to take parking out, or that would be one of the adjustments we would make to your target if you couldn't take it out, right? So, but I think here, I wonder, and I guess I might ask how parking, if one of you knows how parking was handled in the prototype buildings, but for those that are just a little bit less than Energized Denver, like the restaurant bar is 10% less than Energized Denver. I think hotel and office came from Energized Denver. Apartment was the one that came from, and retail too, right, Taylor? I think apartment was the one that came from the protocol buildings. Like, I wonder if we should just direct people like that these are conditioned space targets. Parking should be handled, but then I would ask you, what way should parking be handled?
I would actually prefer to see an added EUI here to do a weighted. What concerns me, I feel like if we completely exclude parking garages, I just feel like you should be penalized if you heat your parking garage, right? Like,
right. We don't want people doing whatever they want in parking garages, and so maybe we just need an adjustment here. It adds to the EUI. Sorry, Elizabeth, you're muted.
Sorry, I keep clicking the wrong button. I was going to say the other reason I bring that up is just what Taylor pointed out when you do have someone who does a conditioned parking garage. So this did come up on a Boulder project the other day where they had, it fit within the fixed EUI thing, and technically because their garage was heated, that counted towards the square footage. And so, it was a little bit unfortunate that they kind of worked the system in that sense. And ideally, I would have preferred that Boulder had separated out parking, even conditioned parking. So, parking, whatever. Here's your allowance for parking garage, to kind of prevent that gaming of the system from happening, but also then to differentiate between projects that provide parking versus projects that don't.
Okay, so you would propose that we should have an adjustment for?
It could definitely just be a line item. It could be, if we're already doing blended, if I've got a mixed use project,
just have a target for the parking square footage, and there could be one for covered versus uncovered, which that's the distinction, at least in portfolio manager. Is that?
Yeah, and probably, uncovered parking, now we're talking about surface parking. That's not really impactful. This would be like covered parking or parking garage. But then, so if I've got a mixed use building now, I can pull, I can pull apartment, I can pull hotel, I can pull office, retail, restaurant. You might have all of these in a single building.
Yep.
Or a single project.
Thank you. I think we can pull a number for parking garage. Does someone have one that they would reference?
I swear I've seen one, Sean. I don't know. I assume the prototype buildings didn't have that.
I think Energized Denver set one, but it wasn't good because mostly it's trying not to regulate parking. I think we're actually going to take it out. So, and Sean, welcome. We started with the PEUI proposal.
I apologize. I had some computer issues and wasn't able to get on or to my email to let you know that I was having trouble. So
one of those days.
Yeah. So most of the prototypes, I think all of them do not have any kind of parking garage in them. They would assume that they would all have parking, but none of them actually include the garage. The code does have terminology to refer to that type of garage, so we would want to utilize that terminology just for clarity's sake. As far as what a target should be for it, I'm honestly not sure. So we would need to look into it a little bit.
Yeah, I think, just lighting is going to be like, that's only like half an EUI, but then it's the ventilation, exhaust requirements that I wonder, but it's probably going to be like a couple EUI.
Yeah,
right?
it'll be little.
So I just looked at Sharon will join us, I think, for the second half of this meeting, so we could circle back to that. She's leading Energize Denver. But I'll put in the chat what they're proposing, actually shifting for the couple of buildings that are predominantly parking, which is, there's only a few, but I'll put them in the chat. The EUIs that they're actually looking at. I don't know how relevant this is for new buildings. You said you weren't worried about open EUI. But this is, I think, the numbers Energize Denver is considering, and we can ask her to explain.
It's like 3 to 9.
Gets on. Yeah, 11 if it's completely enclosed. So we could add those 3. And I'm certain she has a source and could explain those further, though. So I will circle back. If there's time, or if this is generally looking like we're going the right direction, we'll just dig into it a bit more and line up with where Energize Denver is going.
That sounds good. And I think Boulder, well, at least Kristen was going to change it when she was there. I don't know how it's going to end up now, but Boulder was planning to break that out also, just because it started to come up. And Boulder tends to have more projects that heat their garages, and it was sort of an unintended consequence there.
Okay.
When you are modeling buildings that include the structured parking, is there any portion of the design that would prevent, say, just model the rest of the building and let the garage go prescriptively? Because we have a set of prescriptive requirements for garages. I'm just, as a backup plan, if we can't figure out what the EOI target for a structured garage should be, and it will be different depending on whether it's below ground or open side, because the ventilation requirements are different. We just want to make sure that we have as many options as possible as we're thinking about the right way to address this.
I mean, you can certainly exclude everything. It's not ideal, like pretending the garage is not there, partly because there's always such great savings opportunities with the garage, and we don't want to neglect that opportunity in the overall analysis. I also kind of like the idea of being able to reward somebody for designing an open garage versus, putting in a lot of screening where they got to ventilate it and, be a higher energy use. And we also want to penalize somebody if they're doing a heated garage. And that's kind of how we started that conversation, Sean, was because we've had this PEUI or, EUI target for Boulder, and it came up when the garage was heated that it counted to the conditioned square footage, and then it inadvertently skewed that design EUI because of the garage square footage, which kind of sucked. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't like documenting it like that. So to break that out in that way would be, I think, just set us up for better success, knowing what we learned from Boulder.
So with that in mind, the idea of encouraging better garage design, would just using the Energize Denver target for open garages, the 3 UI, as a weight in a weighted average, would that work? I mean, that definitely encourages open garages over partially enclosed or completely enclosed.
I'm not sure. Denver's just, it's interesting because we have a lot of underground parking garages, and it's not like they have an option there. You have to ventilate it. So do we set a code that a garage cannot possibly achieve because it's underground? I don't know. And I say that because it could be a garage that's only a garage.
Yeah, I would say, Sean, my gut check was honestly was 3. Like that's just, I don't know why I had that in my head, but I did. I think that's probably close if you're LED lighting and you're ventilating to the minimum requirement plus turning on for CO. That's probably close. If they're and just heating that ventilation air to like whatever minimum. A lot of people don't even heat it though. So I don't know. That could be a good starting place.
Yeah.
But
just something I would prefer to not pretend it's not there, I guess.
Yeah, and again, if it's like they're doing something crazy, they'll just have to comply a different pathway, right?
Yeah.
So, not the end of the world.
So then perhaps a number for open and a number for enclosed below ground, or well, no, because enclosed within the building is still, there's a lot of good reasons for that beyond just making dumb design decisions, where you would want to do that for the cityscape purposes. So maybe just one for open and one for fully enclosed.
Or maybe it's I don't want to get this so complicated that now we're like, well, what about, this kind of apartment and that kind of apartment and this hotel and that hotel. This just might not be a path for every project.
Yeah, I kind of like the 3 and just leave it.
Yeah.
Keep it parking. I mean, the majority of projects in Denver have maybe some usually they're mixed, right? Some might have a couple below grade parking where they have to ventilate, and then a couple below that are open or at least partially open that have less ventilation.
Yeah.
So it's like they probably have some of everything, but.
And not that we have a lot of heated garages here, but that was definitely a bummer on that Boulder project.
So just do parking, 3.
Structured parking, yeah.
Structured
So we're
parking.
trying to keep this path simple for now, right? That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
First time we have this, we want to keep it simple. Structured parking. We don't need the word open. It's just,
Yeah. No, and you're right, Sean. That if it's a ventilated garage and if it's just a structured parking structure and they can't hit 3 UIs, they got other options.
and we take out the bottom 2 lines, right? Yeah, got it. Okay.
And we'll need to check the appropriate code term for that, because I know there is one. I just can't think of what it is off the top of my head.
Okay, we will do that. Let's keep moving because we have a lot to cover. Thank you, though. That was a good catch, Elizabeth, for that. Hopefully lets more projects take this path. But again, this isn't the path for everyone, this code cycle at least. Let's look at the modeling protocols for this path. I don't want to take too long because again, and Elizabeth, you may want to give a more detailed read. I think we're happy to do more offline, but Sean, do you want to walk through the modeling rules and procedures? I mean, this is a 12-page document with a lot of detail, and I don't think Elizabeth has had a chance to look at it before. So maybe we were supposed to spend 15 minutes on this. I wonder if we actually just try to give you a walkthrough. Elizabeth, Taylor can add anything Sean missed because again, he helped draft and think through this. And maybe if there's things you want to add, you can. I just wonder if we could take some of that offline. But go ahead, Sean.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. I think it's best to start with an overview to recenter everyone, and then we also introduce anyone who's not familiar with it. That this set of modeling rules and procedures is based on the modeling rules and procedures that NBI developed for Boulder. So hopefully takes it the next step forward, learning lessons from Boulder and other places. And really, it just goes through both mostly Appendix G and how to modify Appendix G when you are modeling to a target. And I'd like to focus on the portions that have changed since the last time we talked about this. I don't think we really haven't talked about it comprehensively yet, but I think focusing on the changes makes a good idea, is the best approach. And before we do that, say just kind of one last thing about this is it lives outside of the code for a reason. Modeling to targets is really the very leading edge of modeling code compliance. And so we want to make sure that the rules for doing that are more easily changed and modified to respond to the conditions in the market than you can do through a code. So this would live outside of the code so that it can be updated to accommodate, we came across this issue when we're modeling to targets, including what we just talked about, the parking garages. Technically something like that could be handled in here. And so we want to make sure that we have that flexibility for this path as Denver develops it. So we'll start with right here. This brings in swimming pools. And Elizabeth, I think you brought this up the last time that we talked. There are a couple of other changes to enable this, but the idea being that some of the targets will need to be adjusted sometimes in a reasonable way, and this allows that to happen. Right now, Energize Denver has one for swimming pools, and so that's the one that we're starting with. So we have this adjustment. This is how it's adjusted in Energize Denver, and so we want to make sure that the modeling adjustment follows the same path. And so if you scroll down a little bit, you can see the approach that's used in, that should be cubic feet, by the way, not square feet. Oh no, that's square feet of surface area. I apologize. I did this a while ago. So, this is the way that Energize Denver does it based on the EPA approach from Portfolio Manager. So you can make those adjustments to the target when you have that swimming pool in place.
And Sean, is this intended for indoor pools, outdoor pools, or both?
Both is my understanding. Right now it's phrased so that it can work for either.
And is it based on any particular design conditions? Like what were the where'd these numbers come from?
So these came from EPA.
Sharon can,
yeah.
Yeah, there is a 15-page technical guidance manual that explains exactly how they got to this small little chart. And I can't share the details with you on this call, but I can give you the link to the document if you want to look at it in more detail.
Yeah, Sharon, that'd be great.
Do you want to drop that in the chat?
Yeah.
This was the one target adjustment that Energize Denver feels really final on. They're working on a bunch of other ways, like the standard EUI adjustments. But because this was one that was raised in this group, and this one we felt is final because it's got a big protocol behind it already.
And this one is design related. I think a lot of the Energize Denver target adjustments are going to be operational related, right. And so they might still be relevant, but kind of the design related ones are the most critical.
Okay, great. Let's keep moving, Sean.
Mm-hmm. So we include a documentation requirement just about the EUI required by Energize Denver. This really draws people's attention to it. We see this in the other paths as well, just being called out so that practitioners are bringing that mindful connection between the two, particularly the practitioners who might be coming into the Denver market from outside of the Denver market, might be a little bit less familiar. And probably not many questions on that. So we've made an adjustment based on what we've heard about the schedules and the low density tables that are in there right now, that sometimes they may not be appropriate, and in fact, they might be too low. So the adjustment that's been made here is to make the tables function as minimums. So for the schedule, you have to cover all of the hours in the schedule. You can have more hours if that's appropriate for your design, but not less. The occupancy densities, you can make it more dense, but not less. You can have higher plug load densities, but not less. The idea being that the tables in the guide set a floor for a building asset. So while your building might be used less intensively for its first use than a typical building, the chances of it getting that more intense use in the future are still very real. So we want to make sure that the buildings are capable of kind of a minimum of this efficiency at a minimum level of usage. But recognizing that your design might be more intensive, you can go to more intensive options. So this change shows up in a couple of places to make this happen because, the schedules are referenced in a few different places. And I just wanted to highlight that that's the first place in the schedules. This section adds a new modification, and this is the high altitude derating for gas equipment. Taylor brought up this issue, and so what we're doing here is if you have that basically code level efficiency equipment, you do have to derate the efficiency in your model for generating your EUI.
Sean, I just had one quick comment on there. I think that 5% needs to actually be up a little bit. We have seen like 87% efficient gas equipment before that's not condensing. So that should be adjusted by the 20% as well. So do you see an issue with making that like 10% to 90%?
No, and the 5% was put in just to make sure that minimally exceeding equipment didn't qualify for this exception. So if it does need to be a little bit higher to ensure, then I think that is reasonable.
Yeah, and it's really just going from non-condensing to condensing and making sure we're like capturing that change. So,
and then Taylor provided how they have gone through the official process of doing this calculation. So we included that, and so thank you very much for that. But we also included an exception that allows projects to do that calculation themselves, just in case, there could be some particularity of their equipment or their design. We want to make sure that we keep that flexibility. But we don't want to make everyone go through it by themselves if we don't have to.
And did I capture the right change, the 10% here, and we're leaving 20%?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Yeah, that makes sense. That should capture like all those, individual water heaters and things, non-condensing water heaters.
So here we see that the schedules that we were talking about before. In this case, the equipment power densities function as minimums. You can go higher. So you don't have to use the specific number. And again, internal loads, we see the same thing. And finally, ventilation loads, the same thing. I think this is the last time that it happens.
Could I just go back to the altitude thing again? For the softwares that do that altitude adjustment for you, do you need to note that here? Like if it's not already accounted for in the model or within the software?
So right now it doesn't require you to say how you do it. So my assumption is that when the software does it, it does it in accordance with the ASHRAE handbook. I think that's the only
I'll double
methodology
check.
we
I
would want.
need to follow up on that, but no, it's definitely good to have that in here in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think we could add something in there. I think it's modeler, I guess, to understand in discretion. Like most take account on the air side, but they don't take account with any curve-based object. But it depends on the software. So, yeah.
And only because that also might be, something that gets developed as software evolves. But yeah, it could also just be, modeler responsibility too.
Just
but
so
to
that
not
we're clear,
neglect the issue. Yeah.
just so that we're clear, you're talking about just highlighting it if the software is doing it for you, as opposed to if you're manually entering the adjustments.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm not familiar with all softwares out there, but it could happen.
I think that's a fairly straightforward, documentation shall be provided of method, whether it's in software or manually, and we can add that language fairly easily.
Great. Anything else that we need to talk about within these rules and procedures? And Elizabeth, I find if you need to give them a more detailed read, though, maybe you're familiar from Boulder with a lot of the things except for changes.
I sent that comment, Sean. Boulder never actually adjusted this, but with the schedule for the multifamily plug loads, I mean, it's 3 times that of like lead, which references Energy Star. And this is all basically saying, I don't know. So just if this is the baseline, that baseline's a little crazy, to be honest.
On multifamily plug load specifically.
Yeah, it's just the schedule. Like that 1.24 watts per square foot is totally fine, but yeah, so this schedule is 5,840 full load hours, where the Energy Star schedule is 2,117.
Yeah, I remember we had the same conversation with Boulder when they had us with these mandatory schedules. Where it was, that's not real.
And you have language in here that says, when approved by the code official, you can use something else, but
Yeah. So
every single multifamily is gonna, so it might make sense just to put in the Energy Star schedule, but.
Do you think that makes sense, Sean? Can we make that?
I think that that's reasonable if you find that that's closer to reality. These schedules were developed in like 2013, so recognizing that plug loads have naturally changed in that time.
Yeah, for multifamily, there's the whole Energy Star multifamily modeling protocol, which is pretty great. That works great for multifamily, but for offices and non-residential loads, I think this is a starting point, and if I maybe you can make it so if the modeler has to justify using a different load or a different schedule, that it needs to be explicit.
Yeah, so that's kind of in here already, but
CPD doesn't like to do a lot of that. They just don't have the capacity to tailor.
Yeah.
So I think the more we can get it
that.
right for them, that'll just make this more usable for everyone. So if we're going to switch to Energy Star for multifamily, Sean can just make that change. Are we okay with the others? As again, they're sort of, the worst assumptions, right? You can always assume, or the standard operating assumptions, you can always assume more density, more operating hours. If you want to make sure that
and then
energized Denver.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The nice thing about the Energy Star multifamily protocol is that it rewards, higher efficiency appliances and things like that, because you can use a lower EPD and stuff, but that the schedules and stuff are still consistent.
Okay. Anything else that we need to talk about or adjust in this one? I do want to move to Appendix G.
Sean, I'll shoot you those schedules.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. And do feel free to follow up with other things. If we can, I'd like to move to Appendix G. Okay. Let's move there. Okay, Sean, do you want to walk through? We have 2 Appendix G proposals now. Elizabeth, one is we separated out site for Appendix G. So we'll walk through regular Appendix G and then site Appendix G. Does that sound good, Sean?
It does. So again, kind of the big picture on this, we've tried to simplify this primary approach to Appendix G as much as possible. And part of that involved moving the site energy components into an appendix. So you could think of it as not cluttering up the main path through Appendix G. So anyone who wants to model will see that there's kind of the default way, which is our modified Appendix G, or they can go through these appendices, and each one is kind of this freestanding path, really focusing on clarity and usability. So for the standard Appendix G, we've made some fairly significant modifications to it, and but all of those modifications simplify it. So hopefully that'll make it easy to understand the modifications. I'll address the first thing, which is we did make across the board, we've been making this adjustment to the definition of all electric property, so that if you can still qualify as an all electric property when the building has emergency power systems and standby power systems that could be powered by combustion sources. And we use the definitions of emergency power and standby power that are already in the building code and the fire code. To keep this simple, we don't distinguish between those systems that are required by code and those systems that a building might just elect to install. Just keep it simple. We'll allow it, you know, if it's required, or if the owner thinks that it's necessary, then you can still be all electric and have those systems. And that will become the use of that comes up next. So we can go ahead and go down.
So if I can interject just a tiny bit, because I know this comes up a bit. I know the intent here is to have, no gas on site. But sort of in our quest to get the big loads off of fossil fuels, what do we think about teeny tiny gas loads like, that fire pit that they have to have that I don't have an electric option for, or barbecues, cooking, outside cooking, that kind of thing, where we don't really have a great option. And maybe this is a philosophical question, like, is that project not going to have, will it not count as all electric because of those things? And do we want that? Or do you want to allow a teeny tiny little bit of gas to be allowed for something like that to still encourage the electrification of HVAC and water heating and that kind of thing?
So
and again, maybe just a philosophical question, because that'll be a problem, again, with kind of the multifamily and retail and restaurants and things like that too.
Mm-hmm. So I think philosophically, the point of the all electric path through is to not just get rid of the gas loads, but to get rid of the gas hookup. And, so when we look at emergency and standby power, for the most part, those are diesel. They're not natural gas. I can't say that they are exclusively that case, but so it's not just about the loads. It is about the hookup, because once the hookup is there, the loads can grow. And so that's.
And also, there's always the concern then about gas leakage, which is, 80 times as potent of a greenhouse gas, right? If the hookup is there. And so, yeah, I think that's right, Sean.
So for those buildings that want to keep just a few, gas loads, they would need to go through the mixed fuel path. Prescriptively, partial electrification is incentivized. So getting rid of the HVAC and water heating loads, that does allow you to get through that path far more easily. And then I think both the site energy and the target energy modeling paths also incentivize moving from gas to electric. So while it doesn't give, so if you have those little bit of gas loads, those buildings won't face the same challenge as buildings that have gas for heating, for space or water heating, but they won't get the same advantage as those buildings that have eliminated that gas connection.
Yeah, that's right. Sean, do you want to finish? I'm concerned on time. I want to make sure we have, so let's go through both of these relatively quickly if we could, and then because then Elizabeth and Taylor can think about what they really want to make sure we raise. We can always take little things offline. I don't think that was a little thing, Elizabeth. I just want to make sure we get to, especially the last conversation, which is okay, so given these three options, regular Appendix G, Site Appendix G, and the PEUI option, are we comfortable kind of getting rid of the C407 modeling pathway? And then anything else that's big in here, if we could. Is that okay, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just want to back up to that, what you just described as sort of the goal of not having the gas hookup. We haven't actually explicitly said that. So I think you're still kind of leaving the door open for a building to bring gas to the site, not document any gas in their permit, and then go in and put that fire pit in later. So if the goal is truly to not have a gas hookup to the site for new construction, I think you're going to have to say that. We've got no equipment, no appliances, don't use it. But if we really want no hookups, I don't think we're quite meeting that.
It does say or plumbing for fuel gas.
Yeah,
so
but
if they have the hookup, they have plumbing.
Yeah, but if I still have it to the site, it's that's it's there. I'm not using it, but
Is there a way
I just
to
think you
add
might
some
need to
language
make
on
that
it?
explicit, if that's the goal, to not have
Well-
the hookup, because otherwise people will game that.
So
I think
right
Yeah, no, I
now,
agree. There's a way to add that, Sean. If you could add the clarification there, I kind of agree with that because they're going to segue otherwise.
yeah, I think for, the way that it's written now, it does prohibit any gas piping on the property at all. So that does effectively prohibit the connection. But if it's not clear enough, we can add language to make that even more explicitly clear.
Or even adding the word future.
I think or connection to gas utility would be the phrase to include.
Love it. Love it.
because
That's,
'Cause
I
I-
think that's the key.
and Elizabeth, I think with the grill and fire pit and that stuff, I mean, it's permanently installed, so right, they could do one that's propane still under this, right? You can still have a propane grill.
Where the
And-
fire code allows it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key. It's kind of the key issue with the propane tanks is that it is not allowed in many circumstances.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So the first thing to highlight here is that we have two connections to Energize Denver. The C407.1.2 is really just informative. It's just to make sure that you understand that there is a connection. Under the mandatory requirements, this number 3, this is a reporting requirement for the target EUI from Energize Denver. So this references the ordinance number, and it also references the rules and regulations governing Energize Denver building energy and performance requirements, which is a specific document that's out there that will have all of those, if there are adjustments to the target, here is how they are made. So this really, I hate to use the word force in in code, but this does really force the team to confront the EUI that will be relevant for this building. It'll make sure that it is obvious to the design team, and then all the documentation will have it, so it'll be available to the owners as well.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. Sean, can you make sure we go through the ways you've adjusted the BPFs? Because I know, and then
Sure.
move to the other one. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. So it was brought up that PNNL, who is the one who calculates the BPFs for ASHRAE 90.1, they developed a new process for the 2022 edition of 90.1. It is more robust, more sophisticated, and takes into and leverages some advancements that have been made in Energy Plus since the old methodology was created. And so when they did that, they found that the BPFs that were being generated were in many cases less stringent than those that were in 2019, in a couple cases actually more stringent. And so I do want to really highlight, I think that there have been discussions out there in the modeling world that the BPFs that are in 2019, the published version of 2019, were miscalculated or are a mistake, and that's not accurate. They just moved to a methodology that was more accurate. So they didn't make any mistakes with it. They just moved to a methodology that was more accurate. So PNNL has made available BPFs for 2019 that use the 2022 methodology so that we can adjust those and get the benefit of the 2022 methodology without moving to 2022 and it's, and everything that comes with that. And so when you look at the adjustments here, the all electric properties, these are the standard BPFs from 2019 when calculated under the new methodology. The all other buildings, that's when we apply that old Denver target adjustment to the BPF alone. So we're not applying it to unregulated loads. BPF only applies to regulated loads. So we're only moving that portion of the building consumption. I think it's fairly straightforward. If you look, they're almost all lower. The exceptions are, I believe, restaurant and warehouse are the only two that got tighter. In the case of restaurant, I mean, that might send up a red flag for you, but keep in mind, this is only for the regulated loads, and all those cooking loads are not regulated loads.
Thanks, Sean. Anything else that we need to cover here? Yeah, let's go through site energy if we can. Just
Sean,
yeah.
Real quick, just to clarify too, right? Those BPFs have the Denver adjustment. So there's no other adjustment. We just
Okay.
use those BPFs.
If you're all electric, you just use that one. Those are straight 2019 numbers. If mixed fuel, then it has it's all done. You don't have to use a different equation. And that was really the purpose of this, is to make as few modifications to Appendix G as possible to meet Denver's goal. We really wanted to simplify it and streamline it. And since we understand that practitioners some are going to be adjusting to Appendix G and to the new Denver code at the same time, to minimize the number of things they have to adjust to.
Okay. Let's go through site in 1 minute if you can, Sean. I don't think we made many changes here.
No, the same thing happened with the BPFs. So these are custom BPFs for site energy, calculated with a new methodology, but with 2019 stringency levels. Overall, this whole section has been revised based on Addendum CH for Appendix G, which provides a way to use Appendix G with alternate metrics like site. It was very similar to what we had before, but we figured we would align it completely, because in the future this will be part of Appendix G, and this is pretty much what you'll be seeing in the future for complying with site through Appendix G.
Is there a different formula that we use other than the regular kind of PCI target thing? I'm just looking at that. What is that? Minus 0.05 something something, or is that just for existing buildings?
It's completely the same, except for anytime the energy cost shows up, it's been replaced with site energy. But otherwise, the equations are the same. It's terminology that has to be modified throughout Appendix G. Terminology, but not methodology. I think that's really the key thing.
Taylor, have you guys plugged this in on any of your projects yet to make sure that we're we're on track with goals and stuff?
I plugged in cost. I haven't done site, just because our calculator doesn't do it automatically for me. So I have to do it. My gut check is that an all electric building will hit the site quite easy, honestly. Like if they really go all electric, they should be able to hit these. If they're mixed, it's going to get harder. And then if they're gas, they'll probably go straight Appendix G, and you wouldn't go this route at all. Would be my assumption. But I think, Elizabeth, that's what I was kind of talking about earlier, is what we found was so difficult with Boulder is having the BPF and then adding the 25% on top of it to the whole equation, not just to the regulated loads.
Agreed.
So since this doesn't do that, I feel like they're much more achievable without having, a megawatt of PV on your campus.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, I know you want to vet this a little bit more yourself, but just because, we have 4 minutes left, can I get do you have any other fundamental questions for Sean so you can do that vetting? For you and Taylor, like, how are you feeling about this these three being your three paths where C407 goes away, with a caveat of you need more vetting on this, but and that we, if we needed to, we could adjust the calibration or, or something, right? But we need to, is this generally trending the right direction? Do you have more key questions?
First gut reaction is feels good. I do want to do a little due diligence and make sure that there is a pathway for all projects. But I think I agree with you, Taylor. I think that these are definitely achievable. I also still want to make sure that if I have that project that is mostly electric, that it is still more attractive to be mostly electric than to switch things to gas. That I did struggle with that a little bit under Boulder, well, a lot under Boulder's code, even when I had a fixed EUI option, if I had it mostly electric versus, partly gas. I still want to make sure that those kind of projects, that the electric pathway is still going to look more attractive, even if it's just mostly electric, because, even mostly electric is going in the right direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
And I think
is.
that's really the purpose of the site energy path is
Yeah, I
because it's
agree.
being compared against a gas baseline in most cases, not all cases. I think that will really add to the attractiveness of partial electrification projects.
And that's really what I'm hoping. And when I say I want to do due diligence,
Mhm.
that's what I want to make sure of, is that we still have a really good, tools / weapons to, help net projects kind of nudge in that direction, even for the ones that we can't get all electric because I can't get rid of that damn fire pit or the pool or whatever, that we're still getting those, as much electrified as we can, and that I can still find a pathway that is easier for them to be mostly electric than not. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I do. Taylor, go ahead. You looked like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay.
Obviously I really wanted the EUI pathway as kind of that backup too. If just some of these, I don't think we're going to be able to test every single BPF on and even have enough buildings that makes sense. And I feel really good about the EUI pathway. And this, I think we've all been used to using C407. There's a ton of issues with Appendix G. I think this addressed, especially that site energy addresses those issues. And I think it's just way better baselines if you do a baseline at all. Like currently water source heat pumps are being penalized in C407, which is crazy. So, this addresses some of those issues that have been there for a long time. So
I have one last thing that we'll want to consider. I know we're about out of time. Boulder does not have a fallback if the required solar cannot fit on site. It'd be something to consider, so for, maybe a high energy project that's doing everything that they can, whether it's a, data center or restaurant or whatever. And I use my example of my Boulder McDonald's. They really, really struggled to fit the required solar physically on the site, and Boulder did not really have a good option for them to do offsite or whatever. So it's something that we just may need to build in for those projects that can't get there. Hopefully that's not an issue, but since we're, coming up against it in Boulder, let's just be proactive and find an option for projects here.
yeah, that brings up two great things to clarify too, Elizabeth. One is, right, this still is Appendix G, so there's no maximum in any of these paths on solar being used as an efficiency measure, correct?
Right, except that it has to be on site.
It has to be on site. And then there's also no required minimum, right? Or is that still being discussed?
There's no required minimum for commercial, which is what these would be used on. 90.1 does have a cap on the renewables that you can use toward compliance. And we discussed that a couple of working groups ago. And that's what this, if you look at the bottom equation, I believe that's what it does. I believe that's what that equation is for. So it does cap it at that 5%. And that's built into 90.1 now. It wasn't before, but it is now.
Yeah, so that's a question. I mean, I don't know how the city feels about that. Again, I think we have that EUI pathway, which does not do that. So that is to understand that explicitly calls out you can use as much as you want on the EUI. So yeah, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but just to make sure everyone understands that that's there.
Yeah, I think we might want to evaluate that and reconsider that, because of course we have that now under the current C407 where there is a max size solar, and obviously our energy targets aren't as high. But what teams are going to want to do, and once you make that little investment in solar, it's really cost effective to go bigger, and there is only so much budget. So yeah, I think that should just be discussed. I don't know if it's good or bad or or what, but that's new, and we don't have that in Boulder.
Are you thinking of that in both of the reference model paths or just site energy?
I'd probably say both.
Okay, we can think about that a little bit more. I think, Courtney, this is hopefully a proposal, and I want to let everyone go because we're at time. This is a proposal we're hoping to hear July 7th, right, Courtney? So I am wondering just sort of how much time you want to do a little more due diligence, Elizabeth, just on process. How much time do you need? I don't know that, if you find a lot, we might want to reconvene at least a couple of the key folks like Taylor or Mohit that have been just really involved in this working group with you for a quick powwow to help us revise things so that then they're not surprised too. But if this is looking good, and then do you have any suggested process to sort of wrap up how much renewables and how offsite might work? We'd like to get this to the committee because it's July 7th as soon as we can, right? For their review.
Yeah.
We also just need to finish the prep work.
Okay, there's a lot of questions there, and I know everybody's going to have like vacations and things coming up, which are going to complicate everything. I do have some models that we can test with that are already sort of Appendix G setup, so to say, that we can plug in. And again, I just want to make sure that there's a path forward that works.
And I guess, sorry, with the renewable specifically, does the city have a strong opinion? I mean, if the city doesn't have a strong opinion, my vote would be just get rid of that. But if the city does have a strong opinion, then it could be addressed further. But
I might toss the question back to you. I don't think we want terrible building performance because someone has a lot of solar, right? So
yeah, I guess the 5%, it's another one of those things that seems arbitrary and can be annoying, right? Like, what
totally.
if they can do something and it's cheaper to do 7% solar? Well, you can only do 5, right? I don't know. I agree with you don't want a terrible building and then a ton of solar, but honestly, in Denver, most buildings don't have the space for it anyways. But that could
Except
happen.
for warehouses.
Except for warehouses, yeah. But maybe you want warehouses to have all that solar anyways, but I don't know.
They don't use that much energy anyway.
Yeah. But that's my only thing about the 5% is it just sometimes you can run into issues with it just being 5%. And I don't know where the 5% came from, but that's just my.
The 5% came through the 90.1 and IECC processes of just capping how much efficiency you can trade off for solar. So it was less about how much solar was possible and more about just capping the trade-off, because when you're looking at code minimums that are really minimums, then every bit of solar that you allow is being allowed to be traded off against fundamental building efficiency. And so that's why it was capped at 5%.
Should it be more like 10 just to be a little bit more flexible?
Yeah, maybe, and maybe this is one of those things we have to revisit once C406 is fully written out, depending on how much credit we're giving folks in C406, like if we've got 2 tiers of solar in C406 that go up to 10%, then this number should be 10%. But I get that, maybe we don't want it to be unlimited. But we're also not seeing that many buildings with totally covered solar arrays.
Right.
And if they do, I think that's awesome.
We'll work on that and just how to align. Sorry, Taylor, like a final thought on that. And then I want to propose sort of a next steps.
I just like 10.
Okay.
10, I think would fix it.
10 is more reasonable. We'll think about how that aligns across all the paths and we'll circle back on it. Elizabeth, would it be reasonable for you to do a little bit more vetting on this sort of by the end of the week, sometime early next week? I know that how much or is there something that we could tag others to help you in where so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Taylor, unless you guys have examples where you can kind of, show some, I think I'll have to just have to do it myself. Which is, I mean, that's a lot of time, right? I got to basically clear clear a significant amount, which is hard when you're already working 60-hour weeks. So yeah, I'll just have to, and I'm out half of next week too. So I will try really, really hard. Yeah, I think we'd like to, maybe talk more about the solar, because I guess that's a big question. It's definitely a challenge with the IECC. To clarify, this may be in here for the 2 credits, but to clarify whether this is for that BBPRE is 5% energy for the site and 5% cost for the PCI. Like, we may want to double check that if that's the intent. And I've always been, it's not super obvious in the current C407, but in here, I believe it's intended to be 5% of, I have to follow the formula, 5% of the proposed or 5% of the baseline. It just complicates the metrics. So, and that may be fully in here, but it's just not jumping out to me just yet.
Okay, we can try to clarify that too. Is there a way, I'm just trying to think of what might be helpful, where like you'd want to, if Taylor was willing, tag him to do a few things, you do a few things, by and we circle around like on Monday or Tuesday next week, or how can we help further? Or, if you just need to take until July 7th, it's just hard, it gets harder to adjust once we're in the full committee. We also might be able to move this to the next one, right, Courtney? I mean, I think ideally we were going to do commercial prescriptive and then this, and then electrification for commercial and then residential, I think. So I think this sits more nicely right after we do the C406 in the sequence of things, but we could do C406 and electrification just to give this one a little more time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at calendars. I think I've got maybe 3 sets of models that I could use to test. We've got some that are already set up with Appendix G protocol from Boulder work. Like, I've got a multifamily, I've got an office, I've got a McDonald's, and I think I have a lab. So I guess that's 4. I think I've got 4 that are set up under that protocol, so that I could plug those in and test. So we're not recreating the models from scratch. But yeah, even that, like my tool also doesn't have all of this built in yet. So having to do some of those calcs by hand to plug it in and see how things shake out. But I think the group's going to want to know that that we've all done our due diligence here too.
Totally.
So I think that's pretty important. So yeah, I think the week of July 4th. Oh boy. I probably not. What was the other date you said, Katrina?
The
So this
19th.
This will either be heard on July 7th by the full committee or on July 19th by the full committee. And we need to give them the draft for, I think ideally 2 weeks before they meet, minimum like week and a half. So if we're gonna hear this July 7th, I think it has to go out to them like next Tuesday-ish.
No, I think it's fine for the draft to go out. I feel like it's in good enough shape that at least we can spark some discussion, as long as we're allowed to have a discussion about some of these things. And then maybe, Taylor, I don't know if you guys are going to be digging into this as well. We can come back and share some results. And, if we feel great about it, awesome. That'd be great. If we find some issues, then maybe we can discuss that at that point, if that works with what you're envisioning for that workflow.
I think that could be okay. I think it's better if you all could vet and then it goes to the full committee. We're trying not, right, because the full committee are not all energy modelers. So we're trying to take this working group with a bunch of modelers and send something to the full committee that the working group can say, yes, we've vetted, it's good to go. So if you say could vet by, the week of the 4th, I would rather wait to send to the full committee on, say, the 8th. To consider here, or we could send it to them like that following Monday so that they hear it on the 19th. We could send it to the committee. I'd much prefer the 8th if we're going to hear it on the 19th, so they have a week and a half.
Right. I can provide some feedback this week on just a couple of the projects I have set up, have baselines to just get a rough check, but I have mostly multifamily and then small office, which is less informative, but I can I can send that out to this group this week just to get a quick gut check on them. So.
Yeah, sorry, I'm also battling some time out of the office and trying to think about how much I want to work on vacation.
I don't want to make you work
Which
on
is
vacation.
ideally not much. And
Brittany,
you
I
know,
wonder also, I mean, I think it's less than ideal just for the group sequencing and thinking on things, but could we do residential on the 19th? It jumps us around with the committee, but Robbie was out on the 7th. I think he's in on the 19th.
I can check on that. I'll do that.
Because that could just get you 2 more weeks to do, because I think we might just have to say this working group is still working. I think we could send the draft, but I think for the full committee, I'd rather say the working group has done their vetting and they're happy with it before the full committee is asked to really spend time on it.
well, and there's also the chances if we start to vet it and we come up on issues.
Exactly. That's why
delay
if
it.
you come up on issues and we need a little working meeting to sort out those issues and a little bit more time going around, like, then I don't want to drag the full committee through that, right? That's why I'd rather not send the draft until you all have said it's good to go.
Yeah, I think that might just be better just in case anyways.
Yeah. That's my preference.
And this is the biggest one, right? I mean, this is the hardest one.
I think it's the hardest one for calibration purposes. Where it needs some of that time to check it. So maybe we'll send these final drafts out this. Try to get them out tomorrow. It might be Friday, but you have the ones with the final BPS and everything that Courtney sent last Friday. And then can we give you all a deadline of vetting it by July 5th? So that if we were gonna try, if we can move it, we'll check and see if we can move it to the final meeting, which is the 26th. That means they have to go to the committee on the 15th. So if you all could vet by, say, the 12th, and then maybe we should just hold a time on the 13th or 14th in case we need to talk about it. Would that be possible? Does that sound more doable to you, Elizabeth?
Honestly, it's still hard because I am out.
Those are your vacation weeks.
Yeah, I'm actually out through the 17th. Like
so the 17th.
Yeah, so I'm out like half of next week, and then I'm around the week of I'm here the 5th and 6th. I have a 2-day week.
Well, Robbie's out too, so you're
Yeah.
out. Robbie's out. I'm actually out as well. I'll be going on vacation as well. So, I don't know how many you'll have, but if you guys want to,
yeah, like I'm gonna try to call into the meeting on the 7th, but I might literally be calling from my car, road tripping, and then I am out between the 7th and the 17th.
Till the 17th.
Yeah, so I have 2 days, the week of the 4th. 2 actual regular working days. Now, truth is, I'll probably be working more than that, but I'm trying to minimize.
Does that just make it better to like do a little bit of it this week? Probably not, looking at your week, but that sounds terrible in terms of how much you're in July.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a tricky time for everyone, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best, but yeah, there is no extra time.
Okay. Also, I think we could tag, so Taylor has the multifamily, we could tag others, right? So which other property types would you like to see? We could see if like Mohit, who's been super involved, could run some through, right? Where, I mean, you're testing your colleagues' work then to look at some scenarios, but
yeah, we have a decent library of PCI style models. It's more like modifying our tools so that I can pop all those in there and then see how things shake out. and evaluating sort of that, okay, well, this was a gas building. Do I have motivation to change this to electric? You know, it's some of that.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will see if other modelers are willing to also run a few of the scenarios and share with the group what they're finding. I think we will try to move this to the last meeting on July 26th to give you more time. I'm hearing that, you know, firm deadline isn't that helpful. I think we will hold, but we'll go ahead. I think we need to send this out to the committee on the 15th at the latest. So just know that that's out there. We'll need to sort of ideally sort and say, like, the working group is on board. I think we'll have that from other working group members, but you're a key code committee member. And if there's something we need to sort after, we can, right? Because I know.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, yeah, I'll be able to dig in more, honestly, in the week of the 18th after we get back. So I mean, I think if I'm really honest about it, I could look at it a little bit, but between now and then, I guess probably enough to feel like we're on the right track, right? But
how about we just do this then? Because there's like, because you may not really dig until the 18th, and we sort of have to send to the committee before then. How about we go ahead and send once we hear from Taylor that he's done a little bit of vetting, and we make a few of these changes, and we'll talk through solar some more internally, and we'll go ahead and send this with the others, but we will hold on actually making the decision if we possibly can. We'll have to vote with CPD since they're code committee until the 26th of July, so that you have more time. And if we need to like make adjustments, you come to us that week of the 18th, and we will send the committee a new version with like less days to review or something, and that's less than ideal, right?
Katrina, just a quick question. So if it gets passed, like the BPFs cannot be adjusted ever, or you know, I guess
they can't once it's passed by council. But if the committee say, I mean, the committee could say, even that day, you know, should worst case scenario, Elizabeth doesn't get to work on this till the 25th and she shows up on the 26th, and like I don't want to adjust BPS on the fly in the code committee meeting, but if they directed us to adjust to meet the following sorts of criteria, which you're laying out, that electric is incentivized on, they should have, right? Like I think they could, but I just think it complicates it. So I think they could direct us to make a few adjustments and pass the this proposal with the caveat that we make those adjustments. I don't like that as much, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it would be perfect to present something that is perfect.
Right.
But there's going to be committee members that are going to have questions in things that we haven't thought about. So I think that's the reality anyways, right?
Unless we could vet it sooner, I'm tempted as soon as we've, you know, gotten Taylor's additional review to say this is where the working group is at, and we'll get it out whenever we send the first wave to the full committee, which may be as soon as this Friday, where we'll send, but then we'll put this, if we can, last on the actual committee's agenda to give you more time, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, I really feel like we're on the right track here. Now it's just about refinement, right? So,
Yeah.
You know, if we're looking at little numbers here and there, I mean, I don't think that needs to slow anything down. I think the general concept feels really good.
Okay.
And I think that's the important part for this first meeting. And then if, you know, I come in and, you know, Taylor comes in or whoever and it's like, oh my gosh, we missed the mark on this BPF. We recommend that you change it from this to this. It's not changing the concept. You know, these are just, right. It's little niggly stuff, right? The concept is the important part.
I think the committee could even, I mean, with that said, I mean, the committee could approve on the 7th with the caveat that they're willing to let us niggle a little bit with you. And we don't change our schedule. Is that better?
I think so. I think that could work.
Flow, right? They do commercial prescriptive, they do commercial modeling, and then they do electrification, and then they do renewables. Like,
because I think it's also possible that the other folks in the group are going to want to do the same thing. You know, Jamie and Linda are like, all right, okay, here we go. Let me plug this into some of my models now, because they haven't been involved. Linda's out of town right now, anyways. I want to leave that door open too.
Right. I mean, we could send now and then like tell everyone to get us their niggles if they can by the 15th, and then send a new version or something and hear it on the 26th. But I also think the committee could pass on the 7th with the caveat that you all get to niggle a bit and adjust a bit.
Well, I think this is such a big one. It's going to take some digestion. So I like to present it early. I think it's great to let people know that the due diligence analysis is happening. That's just going to increase the confidence. You know, present it even if we don't vote on it that day, because this one's so impactful to everything. And as you said, the calibration as well, that everything's got to align here. I don't know that this would get done in one meeting. I think it's great to get it in front of people earlier, though.
Okay, we'll consider that too. I don't know if we have time to hear it twice. Go ahead, Taylor.
I was just going to say too, I think it's key, right? Again, that we have 3 pathways. I just think that's part of it, right? That's our backstop at some point too. Like if something looks a little weird, I mean, obviously Sean didn't just make up those numbers. They're from a calculation. So I think it might be hard to move it a little bit in a way that makes sense. And it might just be, oh, well, if you end up in that position, you're probably just not going to use this pathway, which I think is fine. So that's, I guess, why I feel pretty good about it, just knowing that. But I think we should look at it for sure. So.
Well, let's keep it on the 7th, and the committee, I think, we'll think about it. They can decide if they need to circle back or if they're willing to give us the prerogative to make very minor adjustments. Should we feel that's needed after the fact, right?
Yeah, and on the 7th, I'll likely be calling in and
Right.
not on video, just FYI.
Right, and you may not have done your digging, which is okay, and you can think about, like, are you comfortable approving if we can do little tweaks?
Yeah, but I totally agree with you, Taylor. Having these 3 paths, I think, gives us some really good options for folks without getting too crazy. And I feel much better getting rid of the multiplier, because that was what freaks me out the most.
I'm so glad, Elizabeth. Thank you for all the process feedback. Thank you for staying on an extra 24 minutes to wrap this working group up. We will schedule another discussion if, some of your vetting seems to warrant that. But we will also just get this out to the full committee as soon as we can, because then, like, Jamie and Linda Marsden, who are on the committee, Jamie hasn't been in any of the working groups, he can start poking through this also, right? So.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Mohit was here through all of it, but Jamie hasn't been. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.